West Kingston, Jamaica, a place where the smell of salt air from the harbor mixes with the dust of overcrowded lanes, where the working poor built their lives in tenements and shanties, and where, in the years after World War II, politics was not just a matter of opinion, it was a matter of survival. It was here, on a narrow, busy stretch of road called Matthews Lane, that something was born, something that many historians today point to as the seed of everything that would later consume Jamaica's political landscape. A group, a force, a gang, depending on who you ask. They called themselves Group 69, named after the address that served as their base, 69 Matthews Lane, in the heart of West Kingston. And their story does not begin with drugs or money or territory in the way we understand gang warfare today. It begins with votes, with power, and with the cold calculation that if your enemies were willing to use violence, then you had better be willing to use it too. But before we get to the violence, before we get to the riots and the bodies and the broken skulls, we have to understand the world these men were born into, because nothing about Group 69 makes sense without understanding what Jamaica looked like in the years before and after 1944, and what it felt like to be a poor black Jamaican man living in a downtown Kingston lane during those years of transition and struggle. To understand why Group 69 came to be, you have to go back to 1944. That was the year Jamaica held its first general election under universal adult suffrage, and Alexander Bustamante's Jamaica Labour Party, the JLP, swept into power in a landslide victory. Bustamante was a force of nature, charismatic, loud, beloved by workers across the island who saw him as their champion. But his victory did not bring peace. If anything, it deepened the wound that was already forming between the JLP and the opposing People's National Party, the PNP, led by the more reserved, but equally determined Norman Manley. Western Kingston, particularly the area around Matthews Lane, was PNP territory. And after 1944, with the JLP now holding state resources and government machinery, PNP supporters in that area began to feel the pressure. Meetings were disrupted. Supporters were threatened. The message from JLP-aligned groups was clear. This was their Jamaica now, and if you stood in the way, you would feel it. The PNP was not about to lie down. Somewhere between 1944 and 1947, a decision was made. It was not a quiet decision made in a boardroom or a church. It was a street-level decision, born out of necessity and shaped by a man who never apologized for making it. His name was Wills Ogilvy Isaacs, and if you know Jamaican political history, you know that name. Born on February 8, 1902, in Chester Castle, in the parish of Hanover, Isaacs came from humble beginnings. His family were small property holders and shopkeepers, descendants of enslaved people who had carved out a modest existence on the land. He moved to Kingston as a young man and threw himself into the nationalist movement, joining the PNP shortly after its founding in 1938 at the Ward Theatre. He rose quickly. He became a member of parliament, a minister of trade and industry, vice president of the PNP, and one of the most electrifying orators of his generation. People came from all over just to hear him speak. He had a way of taking the frustrations of the ordinary Jamaican, the laborer, the market woman, the unemployed youth from the lane, and turning it into fire. But Wills Isaacs was not just a talker. He was a strategist who believed deeply and without apology that the PNP's survival in places like Western Kingston required more than speeches. It required muscle. And so, around 1947, he formed Group 69. He drew its members from the lanes and yards immediately surrounding Matthews Lane. Young men from Chestnut Lane, West Street, Luke Lane, Pink Lane, and the tenement yards, packed with working-class families and newly arrived migrants from the countryside. These were not career criminals. They were laborers, unemployed youths, community strongmen, people who knew the lanes, knew the neighbors, and were willing to fight for what they believed was their party, their community, their future. Group 69 functioned less like a modern gang and more like a neighborhood militia, a collection of individuals united by party loyalty and a willingness to do what the politicians could not publicly be seen doing. Their job was straightforward: protect PNP meetings from disruption, defend PNP supporters from attack, make it very clear to anyone who came into Matthews Lane with JLP intentions that they were not welcome, and when necessary, take the fight to the JLP and surrounding areas. They armed themselves the way poor men arm themselves, with what they could find: stones pulled from the road, sticks, bottles, sometimes filled with kerosene and set alight, knuckle dusters, hard rings worn on the fist to make a punch feel like a hammer. And as the years went on and the violence escalated, guns began to appear too. Group 69 was not just defending, they were enforcing. And the line between the two, in the heat of partisan warfare, was thin to the point of invisible. By 1947, the tension in Western Kingston had reached a breaking point. Local elections were approaching, and both parties understood that control of these urban constituencies meant control of resources, patronage, and power. It is worth pausing here to appreciate what local election control actually meant in Jamaica in 1947. This was not just about bragging rights. Whichever party controlled a constituency controlled access to jobs, road work contracts, government appointments, small public works projects that could mean the difference between eating and going hungry for entire communities. Political loyalty in this environment was not just ideological, it was economic. When Group 69 protected PNP turf, they were protecting the livelihoods of real people who depended on PNP patronage to survive. That does not justify the violence, but it explains why young men were willing to pick up stones and risk prison or worse to hold that territory. It was in this atmosphere that the worst of the early violence exploded onto the streets. On October 3, 1947, during a JLP campaign meeting in West Kingston, PNP supporters, among them men connected to Group 69, descended on the gathering and broke it apart with physical force. Stones flew, sticks connected with bone, bottles shattered against bodies. 11 people walked away injured that night, bruised, bleeding, and shaken. The message the attack sent was deliberate. This was PNP turf, and JLP rallies here would not be tolerated. But October 3rd was only the beginning. The very next day, October 4th, 1947, the violence spilled completely out of control. A mob, described in newspaper reports of the time as PNP sympathizers, ran wild through the streets of Western Kingston. They moved through JLP areas with weapons, sticks, knives, and guns, attacking anyone they considered an enemy. The headline in one newspaper the following morning read plainly, 2 killed and 35 hurt as mob runs amok. 2 people lost their lives that day. 1 was shot. Another was beaten to death in the street. At least 35 others were injured, with wounds ranging from blunt force trauma to knife cuts to gunshot wounds. When you add the casualties from both days together, the total number of people hurt climbs to somewhere around 46 human beings, injured in 2 days of political carnage on the streets of Kingston, Jamaica, in 1947. And this was only the beginning of what would become a decades-long cycle. Group confrontations with weapons in hand. The violence in Jamaica during this period was deeply mutual. But in Western Kingston, in the lanes and yards around Matthews Lane, the PNP, backed by Group 69, held the upper hand, and they used it. The cumulative effect of the 1947 riots, combined with the ongoing intimidation campaigns carried out by Group 69 through 1948 and 1949, achieved something remarkable in political terms. But before we get to Bustamante's withdrawal, it is important to understand the nature of the ongoing pressure that Group 69 applied throughout those intervening years. This Bustamante, the man who had won the West Kingston seat in the 1944 general election, the man who was arguably the most powerful political figure in Jamaica at that time, was effectively forced out. Armed patrols through PNP held streets, disruptions of any JLP gathering that tried to take place in the area, threats of violence delivered to anyone who might consider campaigning for the JLP in Matthews Lane and its surrounding roads. By 1949, Bustamante's position in Western Kingston had become completely untenable. He withdrew his candidacy for the constituency in what many described as a hasty retreat and relocated his political base to rural southeastern Clarendon, where he could campaign without fearing for his safety. Bustamante was not physically harmed. Group 69 never got their hands on him personally, but they did not need to. They had taken his territory. They had made Western Kingston, in every practical sense, a no-go zone for the JLP. Wills Isaacs was not shy about what had been done or why. In 1949, he was convicted of incitement to riot, a charge directly tied to his involvement in the violent partisan confrontations of that period, including the events around the Gordon Town riot. He accepted the conviction with the posture of a man who believed he had done what was necessary. He continued in politics regardless, serving as Minister of Trade and Industry in Jamaica's post-independence government and remaining one of the PNP's most prominent voices well into his later years. History has treated him as a complicated figure, a genuine nationalist, an advocate for workers' rights on one hand, and an architect of organized political violence on the other. Both things are true, and both matter. You cannot tell Jamaica's story honestly by celebrating only one side of Wills Isaacs while ignoring the other. And it was around this time that he made the statement that would follow his name for the rest of his life and long after his death. When confronted about the violence his mobilization of Group 69 had helped produce, Isaacs reportedly responded with a question of his own. What are a few broken skulls in the building of a nation? The statement was condemned immediately and widely. To many, it was a cold and callous dismissal of human suffering, a politician shrugging at the bodies in the street. To some PNP supporters, it was the frank acknowledgement of a brutal truth, that the PNP survival in Western Kingston had required force, and that force had carried a cost. Either way, the quote has never been forgotten. It has been cited in books, speeches, newspaper columns, and academic papers for decades as a defining expression of how Jamaica's political class came to normalize violence as a tool of electoral competition. Spread from Matthews Lane outward to communities across Kingston, Spanish Town, and eventually the entire island. The Garrison communities that became such a defining and devastating feature of Jamaican life in the 1970s and 1980s. Places where entire neighborhoods were controlled by one party with an iron grip, where voting for the wrong candidate could get you killed, where dons operated as shadow governments, and gang violence was woven into the very fabric of daily political life. All of that traces a direct line back to what happened in the lanes of West Kingston in the late 1940s, back to the meetings broken up with stones, back to the mobs running completely amok, back to the 70-year-old template of Group 69. It is worth noting that Matthews Lane itself went on to have a long and troubled history. The area later became associated with the Spangler's Gang, one of Kingston's most notorious criminal organizations, suggesting that the culture of armed enforcement that Group 69 had planted in that community did not disappear. It simply transformed, shedding its purely political character and taking on the shape of organized crime as the decades passed and the incentives changed. The lane that gave Group 69 its name became, in many ways, a symbol of everything that Jamaica's political and criminal history had intertwined to create. It is also important to understand that Group 69 did not emerge in a vacuum. The roots of political organizing in the lanes of West Kingston go back even further, to the labor rebellions of 1938. That year, workers across Jamaica rose up in strikes and protests against colonial exploitation, demanding better wages, better conditions, and a voice in how the island was governed. It was out of that uprising that the trade union movement in Jamaica was born, and with it, both the JLP and PNP as organized political forces. Bustamante built the Bustamante Industrial Trade Union and used it to recruit and organize unemployed young men from Kingston slums into a base of political support. The PNP, watching this, understood that organizing the urban poor was not just a matter of ideology, it was a matter of survival. When Isaacs eventually formed Group 69, he was in many ways following a model that had already been established. The blurring of the line between union muscle and political enforcement had begun long before 1947. Group 69 was simply the most visible and consequential early example of where that blurring led. The area later became associated with the Spanglers Gang, one of Kingston's most notorious criminal organizations, suggesting that the culture of armed enforcement that Group 69 had planted in that community did not disappear. It simply transformed, shedding its purely political character and taking on the shape of organized crime as the decades passed and the incentives changed. The lane that gave Group 69 its name became, in many ways, a symbol of everything that Jamaica's political and criminal history had intertwined to create. Group 69 operated for a relatively brief window in Jamaica's history. They were not a gang in the way that term is understood today. There were no drug corners, no extortion rackets, no international connections. They were at their core a product of their moment, a time